Racist cop shaves black girl's hair. But wait until you learn who her father is. A ruthless policewoman forces a young black girl to cut off her cherished braids, believing she is a troublemaker. But when she learns who the girl's father is, it's already too late. With power in his hands, the father not only turns the situation around but ensures the officer faces severe consequences. What happens when a cruel act threatens to derail a covert mission that could save countless lives? And can the girl reclaim her dignity after such a humiliating ordeal? Before diving into this intense story, comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more thought-provoking stories. It was late, yet the city streets still shimmered under the pale yellow glow of streetlights. A light drizzle made the shadows of trees sway against the damp pavement. Emily Carter walked briskly, her heart filled with joy after her first-ever solo performance at the Madison Concert Hall. Her pristine white dress fluttered softly with every step, reflecting the faint glow of the streetlights. Clutched tightly in her hand was the concert program, a tangible reminder of her hard work and achievement. She inhaled deeply. Though the air was chilly, warmth spread through her as she replayed the audience's applause in her mind. The melodies of Chopin still lingered in her fingertips as if she were still playing. Each step felt like she was gliding across the stage. Pride sparkled in her eyes, not just for her success but for the praise of her father, Nathan Carter, who had always been her greatest source of encouragement. That morning, before she left home, Nathan had carefully braided her hair into intricate, elegant patterns, something he always did for special occasions. "This hair is your crown, Emily," he had said, his eyes filled with admiration. "Tonight, you'll shine like a star." Her braids were more than just a hairstyle. They were a symbol of his love, care, and the culture they held dear. As she looked in the mirror, she smiled, feeling like a princess. But the beautiful dream was soon shattered by a dark reality. A patrol car rolled up behind her, its flashing red and blue lights cutting through the dim glow of Maple Street. The sound of the engine made Emily's heart pound with unease. Behind the wheel sat Lisa Harper, a middle-aged policewoman hardened by years on the force. Exhausted from a long shift, irritation lingered in her expression as she scanned the streets. Her eyes locked onto Emily, a young girl in a white dress with intricate braids. Suspicion flickered in her mind. A girl like that, wandering around here at this hour? Lisa muttered under her breath. Her gaze narrowed. That hairstyle looks gang-related. Without hesitation, Lisa slowed the car. After a brief moment of deliberation, she pulled over, her headlights casting an intense glare on Emily, forcing her to halt. Lisa rolled down the window, her authoritative voice cutting through the night. "Stop right there. What are you doing out here at this hour?" Emily turned, startled by the sharp tone. She tightened her grip on the concert program, as if it could shield her. "I just finished a piano performance at the Madison Concert Hall," she said softly, her voice steady yet cautious. "I live just a few blocks away." Lisa ignored the explanation. She opened the car door and stepped out, her posture exuding authority. Her boots struck the wet pavement with a heavy thud. "Let me see your ID," she demanded, her cold gaze sweeping over Emily from head to toe. Emily hesitated, stepping back slightly as unease curled around her like a fog. "May I ask why, ma'am?" she asked, keeping her voice polite but firm. "I'm just walking home. I haven't done anything wrong." Lisa's eyes darkened with annoyance. The girl's composure only deepened her suspicion. "Don't play games with me," Lisa snapped. "That hairstyle, don't try to tell me it's not gang-related. Do you think I don't know better?" Emily remained still, refusing to let her emotions show, though a painful tightness formed in her chest. The braids her father had so lovingly styled that morning were now being judged as a sign of criminal activity. "This is the hairstyle my father did for me today," she said, her voice steady but laced with a slight tremor. "It has nothing to do with gangs." Lisa wasn't satisfied with the answer. She stepped closer and yanked Emily's bag from her hands. "You're obstructing an investigation," Lisa barked, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "If you don't cooperate, I'll have to take you to the station." A lump formed in Emily's throat, but she refused to let herself cry. She stood firm, clutching the concert program, her last connection to the night's joy. The rain began to fall harder, blurring the image of the girl in her white dress and intricate braids. She faced a representative of justice who, instead of protecting her, was turning her perfect evening into a nightmare. In the distance, streetlights continued to flicker, but within Emily, darkness was closing in. This wouldn't end here. Lisa grabbed Emily's arm, leading her toward the patrol car. The cold metal of the handcuffs clinked sharply in the damp air. Emily bit her lip and followed, her dream-filled night crumbling into bitter humiliation. "You don't understand," Emily said, her voice trembling but determined. "I didn't do anything wrong." Lisa turned, her cold gaze locking onto the girl. "Silence would be better for you," she replied icily. Her lips pressed into a thin line, unwilling to entertain any explanation. The faint sound of car horns echoed in the distance. The dim lights from nearby houses did little to brighten the grim scene. Emily's world had just been turned upside down. And the worst part? Lisa had no idea who she had just crossed. Emily's white dress, now drenched, clung to her slender legs, a symbol of a shattered dream. But neither she nor Lisa noticed the figure standing at a distance. A man in a black suit watched in silence, his sharp features set in stone, his piercing gaze locked on the scene before him. He gripped an umbrella tightly, while the phone in his pocket had captured every moment. The storm wasn't just in the rain, but in the events that were about to consume them all. The downpour intensified, soaking Emily's delicate braids, the ones her father had so carefully woven that morning. Now, she sat hunched on a bench in the holding area of the police station, her eyes fixed on the damp, crumpled concert program lying on the floor. The proud lettering had smudged in the rain, a cruel reminder of the night's injustice. The sting of humiliation and unfair treatment burned in her throat, but she refused to cry. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Lisa Harper, the stern-faced policewoman, stood behind her desk, filling out paperwork under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her rigid expression remained unchanged, as if her cold demeanor was unshakable. "This girl isn't cooperating," Lisa muttered sharply, not even glancing at Emily. "That hairstyle, definitely gang-related." Mike, a younger officer standing nearby, furrowed his brow as he hesitated before speaking. "Lisa, she's just a student. She doesn't seem like..." "Protocol is protocol." Lisa cut him off curtly. "If we overlook details like this, who knows what she could be involved in?" She turned to Emily, her icy stare unwavering. "I asked you to hand over your bag, and you refused. That's why I had to bring you in. Your lack of cooperation only makes you more suspicious." Emily met Lisa's gaze with quiet resolve, her large eyes unwavering. Taking a deep breath, she responded, "I didn't do anything wrong. Everything in my bag is just sheet music and the program from my performance. If they get wet, they'll be ruined." Lisa remained unmoved. She stepped forward and yanked the bag from Emily's hands. Emily instinctively resisted, but that only fueled Lisa's determination. "Obstructing an officer," Lisa snapped, snapping a pair of handcuffs onto Emily's wrists. The chilling click of metal echoed through the silent room. Emily stood motionless, her rain-drenched body trembling from the cold. Inside, however, she felt a deeper sting, a profound humiliation. But she kept her head high. She wouldn't let Lisa see her break. Inside the station, Emily sat stiffly on a cold metal chair in the holding room. Her dress was soaked through, her hair disheveled, and her wrists cuffed in front of her. The harsh fluorescent lights cast an unforgiving glare over the room, adding to the suffocating atmosphere. Lisa, meanwhile, stood outside, filling out the detention paperwork with mechanical precision. Mike lingered by the door, glancing through the wire mesh window at Emily. His face betrayed his unease, but he remained silent. Lisa pulled another form from the stack and called out to a nearby desk officer, her voice sharp. "Get the barber down here immediately. We need to deal with this hair situation." Mike's eyes widened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Lisa, are you seriously going through with this? She's not a criminal." Lisa didn't even look up. "That hairstyle could be linked to gangs," she said flatly. "Protocol requires us to eliminate any potential risk factors." A short time later, George, a middle-aged barber with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, entered the room carrying his tools. His chest tightened as his gaze landed on Emily. She looked so out of place in that setting, nothing like the people he was usually called in to shave. "This young girl?" George asked hesitantly, his voice tinged with unease. "Yes," Lisa replied coolly. "Cut it all off. It's protocol." George hesitated, then turned to Emily. She sat motionless, her hands resting in her lap. When her eyes met his, they weren't pleading or broken. They were calm, steady, resolute. George stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. He spoke softly. "I'm so sorry, dear. I don't want to do this, but I have no choice. I have to follow orders." Emily lifted her head, her voice quiet but firm. "I understand. Go ahead. I'll be fine." George exhaled heavily and began his work. Each snip of the scissors echoed sharply in the silent room. The intricate braids her father had so lovingly crafted that morning fell to the floor one by one, each strand cutting into Emily's dignity like a blade. George paused multiple times, his hands trembling with guilt. But Lisa stood behind him, her cold gaze pressing him to continue. Emily kept her eyes locked on the small mirror on the wall, watching every strand fall, every piece of herself being stripped away. But she didn't cry. Instead, she held her reflection steady, her gaze unflinching. Through the mirror, she met Lisa's stare, her eyes brimming with quiet defiance. Lisa noticed the look and, for a fleeting moment, felt something unfamiliar, an unshakable unease. This wasn't the expression of someone defeated. This was the expression of someone who would never forget. When the last braid fell to the floor, the room was swallowed by an unsettling silence. Emily bent down and carefully gathered the fallen braids, cradling them in her lap as if they were precious relics. George stepped back, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Lisa turned on her heel and walked away, trying to ignore the knot forming in her chest. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the image of Emily's unwavering spirit. What Lisa didn't realize was that her actions had set something far greater into motion, something far beyond her control. Outside the holding room, Mike leaned against the desk, watching Lisa with quiet disappointment. He said nothing, but his silence spoke louder than words. Inside, Emily remained seated on the cold metal chair, her freshly cropped hair uneven and jagged. Yet, her gaze remained steady, unwavering. Deep down, she knew this was far from over. The room felt heavy with an eerie stillness. She clutched the remnants of her braids tightly in her hands, holding on to the last pieces of her dignity. Every time her eyes fell on the strands in her lap, it felt as if a part of her had been torn away in the cruelest way possible. Outside, Lisa stood by her desk, staring into the distance. Her expression betrayed nothing, but inside, her thoughts were in turmoil. The image of Emily, humiliated yet defiant, lingered in her mind like a haunting echo. She didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. Irrevocably, the front doors of the police station burst open with a loud crash, shattering the silence. Captain Thomas Monroe strode in with an air of authority, each step echoing on the tiled floor. His sharp eyes swept the room, intensifying the already suffocating tension. Officers quickly averted their gazes, pretending to be busy to avoid his scrutiny. Monroe came to a stop in front of Lisa Harper's desk. "Harper," he called, his deep voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Who did you bring in?" Lisa, oblivious to the gravity of his tone, maintained her composed demeanor. "A girl," she said nonchalantly. "She looked suspicious. I caught her walking late at night in this area." "And her hairstyle?" Lisa shrugged, trying to mask her uncertainty. "I thought it might be gang-related." Monroe's eyes narrowed, his brows knitting into a sharp frown. "What's her name?" he asked, his voice slow, deliberate, laced with warning. Lisa shuffled through the file on her desk, scanning the details. "Emily Carter," she replied. "A student, but protocol is protocol." The instant the name left her lips, Monroe's expression changed completely. He leaned over her desk, planting his hands firmly on the surface, his piercing gaze burning with fury. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Lisa hesitated, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Emily Carter," she repeated, her voice faltering as the weight of the situation began to sink in. Monroe exhaled sharply, his anger giving way to something even graver: deep disappointment. Pulling out his phone, he scrolled through his contacts with practiced precision before pressing it to his ear. "Nathan, you need to get here. Now." His tone was curt. Without waiting for a response, he hung up. Turning back to Lisa, Monroe's voice was cold and unforgiving. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Harper?" he demanded. "Emily Carter isn't just some girl. She's the daughter of Nathan Carter, a federal agent currently working on one of the most dangerous undercover missions of his career." Lisa froze, her eyes widening in shock. "The daughter of a federal agent?" she stammered. "That's right," Monroe barked. "For the past 3 years, Nathan has been infiltrating Richard Grayson's network, one of the most ruthless criminal organizations in the country. Every ounce of progress he's made, every life hanging in the balance, could be destroyed because of your reckless actions." Lisa's mind reeled. She tried to defend herself. "I was just following protocol. The hairstyle. Do you think you had the right to cut an innocent girl's hair based on your ignorant assumptions?" Monroe roared, slamming his hands on the desk. The sharp sound made nearby officers flinch. "You've just given Grayson the perfect reason to doubt Nathan's loyalty," Monroe continued. He sat down heavily, rubbing his temples in frustration before pulling out a set of photographs from a file. He flung them onto the desk in front of Lisa. "Look," he ordered grimly. Lisa hesitantly picked up one of the photos. It showed Grayson standing next to Victor Steele, his right-hand man. Steele's cold, calculating eyes sent a shiver down her spine. "Grayson isn't just running drugs," Monroe went on. "He's involved in human trafficking, arms smuggling, and money laundering. Men like him have an army of lawyers, corrupt cops, and even politicians in their pocket." Monroe's voice hardened. "He's already suspicious of Nathan. If he finds out Emily is Nathan's daughter, not only is Nathan's life in danger, but so is his entire family." Lisa's heart pounded in her chest. She struggled to keep her composure but failed. I didn't know," she stammered. "I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" Monroe's voice dripped with sarcasm. "You think that excuses the consequences? If Grayson retaliates, we'll lose our only chance to bring him down." An hour later, hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway. Nathan Carter entered, his dark suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. But his eyes, steely and cold, burned with restrained fury. He strode straight to the holding area. When the door swung open, his gaze locked onto Emily, who remained seated on the metal chair. Though her eyes were tired, they still held a quiet strength. "Emily," Nathan said, his deep voice carrying both concern and anger. She looked up, her face softening slightly at the sight of her father. "I'm okay, Dad," she whispered. "I'm strong." Nathan crouched down to her level, his hand gently brushing over the uneven stubble where her braids had once been. His jaw tightened, his expression darkening. "I'll make this right," he promised. Rising to his feet, Nathan left the room and headed straight for Lisa. His piercing gaze locked onto hers, unrelenting. He studied her, as if reading every thought running through her mind. "Lisa Harper," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Do you understand the consequences of what you've done?" Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but the sheer intensity of Nathan's stare silenced her. "I've spent 3 years building trust with Grayson and his men," Nathan continued, his words measured and cutting. "And because of your ignorant, prejudiced decision, he's starting to doubt me. If I die, if my daughter is harmed again, It's on you. Lisa felt her legs weaken beneath her. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, she stammered. Nathan raised an eyebrow, his stare ice cold. Fix it? He repeated. You might not get that chance. Monroe stepped forward, cutting into the exchange. We'll deal with this later, he said firmly. Then, turning to Lisa, he added, You're suspended. Effective immediately. Nathan barely spared her another glance before focusing on the only thing that mattered now. What came next? Lisa collapsed into a chair, feeling as though every ounce of strength had drained from her body. Her hands trembled as she buried her face in them, her breaths coming shallow and ragged with panic and regret. What had she done? The image of Emily, her tear-filled yet defiant eyes, replayed in Lisa's mind like an unending nightmare. Regret surged through her like a tidal wave, washing away every justification she had once clung to. Deep down, Lisa knew that her actions had not only wounded Emily, but had also put an entire mission in jeopardy. A mission that had required years of sacrifice and relentless effort now teetered on the brink of collapse because of one reckless decision. Pacing the room like a caged animal, Lisa felt the weight of her actions pressing down harder with every step. The walls seemed to close in on her, forcing her to confront the consequences of what she had done. Every detail of that night replayed in her mind. The click of the handcuffs, the snip of the scissors, and Emily's unwavering gaze, filled with quiet defiance. I was wrong, Lisa whispered, her voice cracking. Her actions had not been about justice or investigation. They had been about asserting her misplaced authority in a moment of weakness. In that instant, she had betrayed the very principles she had sworn to uphold. Standing by the window, Lisa stared out at the dim glow of the streetlights. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed. But for her, everything had. She had betrayed not only her duty but also her own humanity. There was no undoing what had happened. The only question was whether she had the courage to make amends, or if it was already too late. The ticking of the wall clock echoed in the room, each sound a reminder that time would not wait. But for Lisa, every passing second felt like a lifetime of judgment, deepening the chasm of regret she would carry forever. Lisa received an urgent summons to meet Nathan at the police station. She tried to maintain her composure, but each step toward the meeting room felt heavier than the last. The weight of her mistake loomed over her like a storm cloud. As soon as she stepped inside, Nathan's voice cut through the air like a blade. Do you understand what you've done, Harper? His tone was low, commanding. Lisa's eyes dropped to the table. She couldn't bring herself to meet his piercing gaze. I know I messed up, she stammered. But I didn't think. You're right, Nathan interrupted, his voice thunderous. You didn't think. You didn't think about the consequences. You didn't think about my daughter's safety. You didn't think about the entire criminal network I've spent years trying to take down. Lisa remained silent. She knew there was no excuse that could undo what she had done. But Nathan's expression wasn't just anger. It held something else, a flicker of something unexpected. He was giving her a chance to make it right. You have an opportunity to redeem yourself, Nathan continued, his tone colder now. But it won't be easy. I need you to do something I wouldn't trust anyone else to handle. Lisa looked up, her eyes filled with both worry and curiosity. What do you need me to do? Nathan slid a file across the table, flipping it open to reveal photographs of Victor Steele, Richard Grayson's ruthless and calculating right-hand man. Because of what you did, Grayson is beginning to doubt me, Nathan explained. He's probing every connection around me, including Emily. If we don't act fast, he'll uncover my identity, and the entire mission will fall apart. Nathan's voice was firm. I need you to get close to Victor Steele and earn his trust. Lisa's stomach twisted. Her heartbeat quickened. Victor Steele, she murmured. The man they call the human lie detector. Nathan nodded. You're the only one who can do this. You're a cop, and after what you did to Emily, Grayson will have no trouble believing that you're disillusioned with the system. If you can gain Steele's trust, you'll have a chance to get close to Grayson himself. A chill ran down Lisa's spine. Victor Steele wasn't just dangerous. He was notorious for seeing through deception in an instant. But she also knew this might be her only chance to set things right. "And if I fail?" she asked, her voice unsteady. Nathan's response was a hard, unwavering stare. "If you fail, it's not just your life on the line," he said. "Mine, Emily's, and countless innocent lives will pay the price." Lisa stepped into a dingy bar on the outskirts of town, a well-known gathering spot for Grayson's network. She wore a worn leather jacket and ripped jeans, her hair tied up in a messy bun. Every detail of her appearance had been carefully crafted. She needed to look like a cop who had finally had enough. A woman tired of rules, tired of limits, ready to cross the line. As she entered, all eyes turned to her, scanning her from head to toe. She forced herself to remain calm, walking with deliberate confidence to the bar. She ordered a whiskey. Then, in a voice loud enough for Victor Steele to hear, she said, "Being a cop doesn't pay much, does it? Too many rules, too little reward. I think it's time to start making some real money." Across the room, Victor looked up. His razor-sharp gaze locked onto Lisa like a predator sizing up its prey. She felt his scrutiny, as though he were dissecting her every word, every movement. "Who are you?" Victor asked, his voice low and menacing. Lisa turned to face him, keeping her expression neutral. "Harper," she answered curtly. "Cop. But I'm done playing by the rules. I heard you might be able to help me out." Victor's lips curled into a cold, knowing smile. "You think I trust just anyone who walks in here and says they want to work with me?" Lisa leaned forward, her tone steady, unwavering. "I don't need you to trust me," she said. "I just need a chance to prove myself." Victor studied her for a long moment, his gaze unyielding. Then, without a word, he stood and motioned for her to follow. Lisa took a breath, steadying herself, and then she followed him outside the bar. The cold night air stung Lisa's skin as she followed Victor. Her palms were clammy despite the chill, but she forced herself to remain composed. Memories of her early days as a cop flooded her mind. Moments when she had been taught to judge people by their looks. Always distrust the kids with unusual hair. An older officer had once advised her, "They're always hiding something." Those harmful lessons had shaped Lisa's instincts, causing her to view Emily not as an innocent girl but as a potential threat. "Maybe I've been wrong all along," she muttered under her breath, the weight of her past biases pressing down on her. Victor led Lisa to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Inside, a simple room contained just a table and 2 chairs. He sat down and gestured for Lisa to take the seat across from him. "You said you want to work with us?" Victor said, his tone cold and sharp. "Convince me." Lisa sat down, steadying her nerves. "I'm a cop, but I'm done with the broken system. I can provide you with information, investigation plans, raid schedules. In return, I want a cut of the profits." Victor stared at her, his suspicion clear. "Why should I trust you? You could be a spy." Lisa took a deep breath, her voice calm and firm. "If I were a spy, you'd already be in cuffs. I'm not here to beg for trust. I'm here to work." Victor narrowed his eyes, the tension in the room thick. After a long, agonizing pause, he smirked and nodded. "All right, I'll give you a chance. But remember, if you betray us, the consequences will be unpleasant." Lisa exhaled slowly, knowing this was only the beginning. She had entered a dangerous game, one that required her to walk the razor's edge between deception and survival. But she also knew she had no choice. This was her only path to redemption. Soft sunlight streamed through the window of the Carter family's modest home, casting pale streaks across the wooden floor. Emily sat at the old piano in the living room, her delicate hands hovering over the keys. The uneven patches of her hair, once a source of anguish, had become something she was slowly learning to accept, though the deep emotional scars still simmered beneath the surface. Before her, a blank sheet of paper rested on the music stand, untouched by any notes. Emily sighed, closing her eyes as she let the sounds within her mind emerge. Her fingers began to move cautiously at first, producing tentative yet heartfelt notes. A melody took shape, a wordless piece, starting with somber low tones that spoke of loss and humiliation. As the music evolved, brighter, higher notes wove their way in, expressing hope, resilience, and determination. Nathan Carter stood quietly in the corner of the room, watching his daughter with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Emily was more than just his child. She was a beacon of strength. Through her music, she was not only healing herself, but also telling her story. When the final note faded, Emily looked up, her eyes shimmering with a faint sadness but also a newfound clarity. Turning to her father, she smiled gently. "They can take my hair, Dad," she said, her voice steady. "But they can't take my strength." Nathan walked over, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Emily," he said softly. "You're not just strong. You're teaching me that no one can break you unless you let them." Emily nodded, glancing back at the blank sheet on the music stand. She resolved to write down the piece she had just played, each note a testament to her journey through pain and recovery. A few blocks away, Lisa Harper sat in her car, parked under the dim glow of a streetlight. The faint yellow light illuminated her face, etched with tension and regret. The image of Emily's defiant gaze in the holding cell haunted Lisa whenever she closed her eyes. The crushing weight of guilt pressed down on her more with each passing day. Lisa couldn't escape the truth. Her actions had been wrong, not just in what she had done, but in how she had seen the world. Years as a cop had twisted her perspective, imprisoning her in prejudice and fear. She thought back to her early days on the force, when she had been a young, idealistic recruit, eager to make a difference. Slowly, the words of older officers began to warp her mindset. "Kids like that are never innocent," one had said. "If they're not guilty yet, they will be." Those toxic lessons had embedded themselves in her, leading her to view Emily not as a girl, but as a potential threat. Now, parked near the Carter home, Lisa's regret felt unbearable. She stepped out of the car, her legs trembling as she approached the house. Warm light spilled from the living room window, and through it, Lisa saw Emily seated at the piano. Lisa froze, unable to step closer, watching from a distance as Emily played. The music floated through the night, haunting and powerful, a melody that spoke of both sorrow and resilience. Every note seemed to pierce Lisa's heart, awakening emotions she hadn't felt in years. Emily's new composition captured the pain of her recent experiences, but also her strength in rising above them. Lisa's throat tightened as she remembered the uneven haircut and Emily's unwavering gaze of defiance. At that moment, Lisa realized that Emily wasn't just a victim. She was an inspiration. Back on her mission, Lisa no longer approached her work with the detached efficiency of a cop following orders. She had a new purpose: to bring down Grayson's network, not just for the sake of the case, but for Emily and herself. Each meeting with Victor Steele pushed her deeper into Grayson's operations. The danger was palpable, but Lisa was resolute. She meticulously documented every detail in a notebook each night, a habit that became both a lifeline and a reflection of her growing sense of accountability. One night, sitting in her dimly lit apartment, Lisa scribbled one final line before closing her notebook. Emily's resilience became Lisa's guiding light. If she could rise from humiliation, then Lisa could rise from her mistakes. Determined to do something meaningful for Emily, she reached out to Nathan and arranged for Emily to visit the local music center, a place where she often played. There, Lisa secretly left a sheet of music she had composed herself, inspired by the melody she had heard through the Carter window. When Emily discovered the sheet music on the piano, she examined it with curiosity. As she began to play, recognition dawned. The music mirrored her emotions: pain, defiance, and forgiveness. Each note seemed to speak to her as if it had been written directly from her soul. Emily had no idea who had composed the piece, but a soft smile spread across her face. To her, the music was a language of healing. Watching Emily gradually regain her strength, Lisa felt as though a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She understood that the road to redemption would be long and difficult, but she had taken the first step, not just for Emily, but for herself. Lisa no longer viewed her duties as mere tasks to complete. She worked with a renewed purpose, determined to prove that she could change. She aimed to rebuild the trust she had broken with Nathan, with Emily, and with the community she had once vowed to protect. Nightfall cloaked Grayson's warehouse in darkness, the faint glow of industrial lights struggling to penetrate the oppressive air of danger. This was the heart of a vast criminal empire, a hub for drug trafficking, arms deals, and other illicit activities. Tonight would also mark the final confrontation, a battle full of unpredictable risks and sacrifices. In the FBI's briefing room, Nathan Carter and his team of agents prepared for the raid. A large map of the warehouse lay spread across the table as each team member listened intently while roles were assigned. Lisa Harper stood in a corner, her face tense, yet her eyes burned with determination. She knew her role in this mission was critical, not only to make up for her past mistakes but also to protect the people she had wronged. Nathan pointed to a red circle on the map, his voice firm and commanding. "Thanks to the intel from Harper, we know Grayson will be here tonight. He's meeting with his partners to expand his network. This is our only chance to capture him and dismantle his operation." The team nodded silently, their faces resolute. Lisa stepped forward, her voice steady. "I'll go in first and keep Victor Steele distracted. I'll also pinpoint Grayson's exact location." Nathan studied her for a moment, his gaze filled with both concern and trust. "Harper, are you sure? It's going to be dangerous in there, especially if Victor suspects you." Lisa nodded firmly. "I've come this far. I'm not stopping now." Taking a deep breath, Nathan addressed the team. "We'll split into 3 groups. Harper will signal when it's time to strike. Be prepared for anything. This isn't just an arrest. It's a battle." Dressed in plain yet durable clothes, Lisa entered the warehouse, her familiarity with the environment making her movements confident. The air was thick with tension as members of the organization moved about, checking goods and engaging in hushed conversations. Victor Steele stood at the center, exuding authority like a general commanding his troops. His sharp eyes scanned the room, analyzing every detail. When he spotted Lisa, a faint smirk tugged at his lips, though his gaze remained cold and suspicious. "Harper," he called out, his voice low and commanding. "You're just in time. We need to do a final check before this shipment moves out." Lisa maintained her composure and walked toward him with a nod, knowing that any hesitation could give her away. As she pretended to inspect the goods, her hand slipped into her pocket to activate the signal device for Nathan and the FBI team outside. Nathan and his team received Lisa's signal. Speaking into his radio, Nathan issued the order. "Move in from multiple directions." The large doors of the warehouse exploded open, and shouts filled the air. "FBI, don't move!" Chaos erupted. Gunfire rang through the building as agents clashed with the criminals. Lisa tried to keep Victor occupied by asking questions about the shipment, but his instincts kicked in. "What are you up to, Harper?" Victor growled, pulling a gun from his waistband. Lisa steadied her breath, her voice calm. "Just doing my job." Victor's sharp gaze pierced through her, realizing he had been betrayed. He raised his gun toward her, but before he could fire, Nathan and his team burst through a side entrance. "Drop the gun, Victor," Nathan shouted. Victor spun around, aiming at Nathan. In that split second, Lisa made a decision. She lunged at Nathan, pushing him out of the bullet's path. The gunshot rang out, and Lisa collapsed to the ground, blood seeping from a wound in her shoulder. As Lisa lay on the floor, blood soaking through her shirt, Nathan rushed to her side. Despite his concern for her, his focus quickly shifted as Victor fled deeper into the warehouse, desperate to escape. Nathan barked an order. "Team 2 with me." Nathan and his team pursued Victor into a small room, where Richard Grayson was hastily attempting to destroy critical documents. The room quickly became a battleground as Victor, cornered but relentless, fought back with fierce determination. Despite his desperate resistance, Nathan and his team eventually overpowered him. Meanwhile, Grayson was captured by another agent and handcuffed. He smirked coldly, saying, "You think arresting me changes anything? I have people everywhere." Nathan didn't flinch at the threat. He met Grayson's gaze with a steely expression and replied, "We'll handle the rest for now." With the warehouse secured, Nathan hurried back to Lisa. She lay motionless on the ground, her shirt drenched in blood, but her eyes remained open, gleaming with unwavering resolve. "Harper, are you okay?" Nathan's voice trembled as he knelt beside her. Lisa gave a faint, weak smile. "I promised no more failures. I did it, didn't I?" Nathan gripped her hand tightly, his voice thick with emotion. "You've done more than anyone could have, Harper. You saved me. You saved the mission." An ambulance soon arrived to take Lisa to the hospital. Nathan watched as she was loaded into the vehicle, his heart swelling with gratitude and respect. A few days later, Lisa woke in a hospital bed to find Nathan and Emily standing by her side. Emily's expression was softer and kinder, a stark contrast to the guarded look she had worn before. "Thank you," Emily said quietly but firmly. "You saved my dad. You proved that anyone can change." Lisa's smile was faint but genuine. "No, Emily, you changed me. Your strength is something I'll always remember." Nathan placed a reassuring hand on Lisa's shoulder. "Harper, you've redeemed yourself in ways no one can question. You've saved lives, including your own." As a tear rolled down Lisa's cheek, she realized that her long and painful journey had led her back to herself. The next morning, soft sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating the small room where Lisa Harper was packing the last of her belongings at the police station. Each item she placed in the box brought back memories. A badge that once symbolized her ideals, a notebook from her early days on the force, and a team photo she had once cherished like family. But now, Lisa understood it was time to leave, not only to atone for her past but to start anew. In Captain Monroe's office, Lisa placed her resignation letter on the desk, her expression resolute though tinged with emotion. Monroe picked up the letter and read it slowly before looking up at her. "Are you sure about this, Harper?" he asked seriously. "You just redeemed yourself from a major mistake. Frankly, the team needs someone like you, someone who understands the flaws in the system and can help change it from within." Lisa gently shook her head, a bittersweet smile gracing her face. "Captain, I've thought about this a lot. I'm no longer the right person for this role. Being a cop has taught me so much, but I need to step away from the shadows of the prejudices this job once fostered in me. I want to start fresh, from the ground up, by helping the people I've hurt." Monroe remained silent for a moment, then set the letter down on his desk. "I respect your decision, Harper, and I hope you know that your actions during the last mission proved your courage and your capacity for real change. Don't ever forget that." Lisa nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders as she walked out of the office. She carried with her a sense of both relief and determination. From this point forward, she would no longer wear the badge, but she would embark on a new journey, a journey of redemption and service. Meanwhile, Emily Carter's music career continued to thrive. After a successful performance at a grand concert hall, her name began to spread far and wide. Her story, a young woman overcoming adversity and transforming pain into strength, became an inspiration for thousands. At every performance, Emily didn't just play music, she shared her story. "Music is how I heal," she said in an interview, "and I hope it can help others find strength within themselves." At one major concert, Emily debuted a new composition she had written. The opening notes, gentle yet powerful, recounted her journey from pain and humiliation to resilience and forgiveness. As the final notes faded, the audience sat in stunned silence before erupting into thunderous applause that lasted for minutes. Sitting in the front row, Nathan Carter watched his daughter with pride shining in his eyes. He knew that Emily had not only overcome her struggles, but had transformed them into something beautiful, inspiring those around her. One afternoon, as Emily returned home, she found an envelope neatly placed on the table with her name written on it in careful handwriting. Inside was a letter from Lisa Harper. "Emily, I know that sometimes apologies aren't enough, but I still want to say how deeply sorry I am for what happened. I acted unfairly, letting my prejudices guide me, and caused you pain that you didn't deserve. There is no excuse for that, but I also want you to know that you changed me. Your resilience and courage forced me to confront myself and the mistakes I once refused to acknowledge. You've taught me that true strength doesn't come from power. It comes from compassion and forgiveness. I've resigned from my position to start over. I'm now dedicating myself to community work, and I hope that through my actions, I can begin to make amends. Thank you for not letting me destroy who you are. You've inspired me to become a better person. Wishing you success and happiness, Lisa Harper. Emily folded the letter and gently placed it on her piano. She stared at it for a long while, a mix of emotions swelling inside her: relief, gratitude, and a sense of closure. While the past couldn't be undone, she felt that part of the burden she'd carried had been lifted. A few weeks later, at the community center where Lisa had started working, she was leading a group of teenagers in a workshop about overcoming adversity. Many of the teens had faced challenges similar to Emily's, often being judged or labeled unfairly. Lisa listened intently to their stories, using her own experiences to help them find hope and self-confidence. Suddenly, Lisa noticed a familiar figure standing in the doorway: Emily. Her heart raced, but she composed herself. After the session ended, Emily approached her, her expression calm yet warm, accompanied by a faint smile. "Thank you for the letter," Emily said. "I don't hate you. I'm glad you've changed." Lisa felt her throat tighten. "Emily, thank you. You've given me a chance to make things right. I'll never forget that." For a moment, they stood in silence, not one of distance, but of understanding. Though their paths were different, they both sensed that the wounds of the past had turned into lessons for the future. Emily continued her musical journey, performing across the country and using her story to inspire others. She composed new pieces that carried messages of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of human connection. Lisa, on the other hand, remained steadfast in her work at the community center. She organized workshops, mentored youth, and worked to rebuild trust within the community. Her efforts weren't just about helping others. They were about proving to herself that she could change. Though their journeys diverged, both Emily and Lisa carried with them a shared understanding. Resilience and forgiveness had the power to transform lives, not just their own, but those of countless others. Lisa, Emily, and Nathan had each endured their share of trials. Yet through their pain and perseverance, they emerged stronger, embodying the truth that from hardship, people can rise, overcome, and find a brighter, more hopeful path forward. The warm hues of sunset bathed the city in a peaceful glow, setting the stage for a momentous evening at the Grand Concert Hall. Hundreds of attendees gathered for Emily Carter's long-anticipated performance. This concert wasn't just an opportunity for Emily to showcase her talent. It was her platform to tell her story, a story of resilience that had inspired so many. In the farthest corner of the auditorium, Lisa Harper quietly slipped into a seat, choosing an inconspicuous spot away from the spotlight. Her presence wasn't about seeking recognition or forgiveness. It was simply to witness this moment, Emily's triumph over adversity. As the audience settled, the murmurs faded, replaced by reverent silence. Lisa felt her heart race as she looked toward the stage where Emily would soon appear. She couldn't suppress a mix of pride and emotion, thinking of the young woman she had wronged, but who now stood stronger than ever. The stage lights brightened, revealing Emily in an elegant white dress. Her steps were graceful yet confident, embodying an artist fully in command of her space. Lisa's eyes stayed fixed on Emily, captivated by the transformation of this once-wounded girl into a beacon of strength. Emily took her seat at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys for a brief moment. She looked out into the audience, her gaze sweeping over the rows of faces until it briefly paused where Lisa sat. Lisa froze, her breath catching. But instead of looking away, Emily nodded slightly, a subtle, serene acknowledgement. It wasn't anger or bitterness that Lisa saw, but forgiveness and acceptance. It was a silent message. The past had been laid to rest, and they had both moved forward. As the first piece ended, Emily rose and walked to the microphone. The audience held its breath, their attention fully captured. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Emily began, her voice clear yet full of emotion. I want to share a story with you. A story of my journey and the lessons I've learned." She paused, her eyes glistening with courage. "There are times in life when we face pain that feels insurmountable. But I've learned that true strength isn't in what we lose. It's in how we confront that pain and rebuild ourselves from the fragments." The room was silent, hanging on her every word. Lisa felt a wave of emotion wash over her, realizing that Emily's words resonated deeply, not just with the audience, but with her as well. "Music helped me find the strength within myself," Emily continued, "and I hope my story inspires you to know that no matter what life throws your way, you can stand up and move forward." When Emily finished speaking, the hall erupted into applause. Lisa joined in, tears streaming down her face. The applause wasn't just for Emily's talent. It was for her courage, her forgiveness, and the strength she had discovered within herself. Emily returned to the piano to perform her newest composition, Resilience. The opening notes were gentle, like raindrops, but gradually swelled into a powerful melody. It was a musical story of transformation, a journey through pain, perseverance, and ultimate triumph. Lisa closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. Each note felt like a reflection of Emily's story, but also her own, a tale of past mistakes, hard-won growth, and newfound hope. The melody whispered that no matter how dark the past, light could always be found. As the final note faded, the audience remained still, unwilling to disturb the sacred moment. Then, applause erupted once more, filling the hall with a thunderous display of appreciation. Lisa smiled, wiping away the last tear that trailed down her cheek. She understood, in that instant, that Emily had truly moved beyond her pain. Not just her personal struggles, but also the weight of everyone's expectations. As the concert came to a close, Lisa chose not to approach Emily. Instead, she quietly slipped out, leaving the spotlight for Emily to bask in her well-deserved triumph. On her walk home, however, Lisa felt a profound sense of relief, one she had never known before. She knew, without words, that Emily had forgiven her. That forgiveness had been conveyed through Emily's calm, accepting gaze. The next morning, at the community center, Lisa led a group discussion with teenagers who had faced prejudice and hardship. She shared her own story, speaking openly about her mistakes and the lessons she had learned. Her honesty resonated deeply with the group. Lisa didn't sugarcoat the truth, but used her experiences to show that change was always possible, no matter one's past. Weeks later, Emily and Lisa's intertwined stories became the subject of a short documentary produced by a nonprofit organization. The film chronicled Emily's transformation from a victim of prejudice to a symbol of hope, alongside Lisa's journey from a flawed enforcer of those prejudices to a mentor dedicated to change. The documentary went viral, touching hearts across the nation. Emily received letters from young people thanking her for inspiring them to find strength in their struggles. Lisa, too, found more teenagers seeking her guidance at the community center. One afternoon, as Lisa supervised a mural project at the center, Emily's resilience played softly through the speakers. Lisa paused to admire the nearly finished mural. Bright colors depicted a phoenix rising from the ashes, accompanied by the words, "Resilience is strength." A warm smile spread across Lisa's face. She knew that her journey and Emily's were forever intertwined, not to erase the past, but to transform it into something meaningful and beautiful. The soft glow of morning light filtered through the windows of the community center, filling the space with a calm energy. Lisa Harper, dressed simply and comfortably, arranged chairs and tables for the morning's gathering. Her days at the center had become a familiar rhythm, a grounding routine in her new life. No longer wearing the badge of a police officer, Lisa now devoted herself to mentoring disadvantaged youth, helping them rediscover hope and faith in their future. Each day at the center was both a lesson and an act of redemption for Lisa. She spent hours listening to the children's stories, offering support for problems both big and small. Some kids were initially distrustful of her, a sentiment Lisa fully understood. She never rushed them, choosing instead to let her actions demonstrate her sincerity. One day, while guiding a group of teenagers working on a mural. A shy boy named Jaden hesitated before speaking up. "Miss Harper," he asked cautiously, "why are you here? You're not like the others." Lisa paused and turned to face him with a gentle smile. "I'm here because I want to make up for my mistakes," she said softly. "I used to have the wrong ideas about people and that hurt others. But I believe anyone can change if they truly want to." Jaden didn't say anything more, but the guarded look in his eyes softened slightly. Lisa saw a glimmer of trust, a small but significant step toward connection. In another room at the center, the sound of piano keys echoed warmly. Emily Carter was teaching a group of children how to play music. She had recently agreed to volunteer at the center, inspired by Lisa's suggestion that music could be a powerful way to connect with young people. Emily's classes were about more than just music. They were lessons in resilience and hope. One afternoon, Emily noticed a girl named Lila, around 10 years old, sitting quietly in a corner, avoiding the group. "Lila, would you like to try?" Emily asked, approaching her gently. Lila shook her head. "I'm not good at it. People will laugh at me," she murmured. Emily knelt beside her and smiled. "You know, I used to think I wasn't good enough to perform in front of an audience. But then I realized it's not about what others think. It's about how I feel when I play." Sitting next to Lila, Emily began to play a soft melody. After a moment, Lila tentatively placed her hands on the keys, tapping out a few hesitant notes. Emily encouraged her with a warm smile, and in that small moment, Lila began to believe in herself. As time passed, Lisa and Emily began collaborating more often on activities at the center. Emily led piano classes, while Lisa provided emotional support to help the children navigate life's challenges. One day, as they prepared for a small recital featuring the kids, Lisa paused and turned to Emily. "Emily, I don't know how to thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here doing this." Emily met Lisa's gaze with a gentle look. "Miss Harper, I think we're both trying our best. What matters is that we don't stop." Emily's words struck a chord with Lisa. Despite the gulf that had once separated them, they had become a team, working together to bring positive change to their community. That evening, the children performed their pieces in front of a cozy, supportive audience. Emily played alongside them, her presence a reassuring guide. Lisa stood at the back, cheering for each child as they stepped onto the stage. When the recital ended, the room erupted in applause. Lisa and Emily exchanged smiles, each feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. What had begun as pain and conflict between them had blossomed into something beautiful, a shared commitment to healing and hope. The community center became a beacon of positive change in the neighborhood, and stories of Lisa and Emily's journey spread, inspiring others to reflect on their capacity for growth and forgiveness. Lisa was no longer just someone seeking redemption. She had become a guide, helping teenagers envision brighter futures. Emily, both an artist and a teacher, didn't simply share music. She planted seeds of belief in every child she worked with, showing them that they could overcome life's obstacles. Lisa and Emily understood that they couldn't change the entire world, but they could make a difference in the lives of those around them, and for them that was more than enough. Together, they had turned a painful chapter into a story of growth and hope. Their work at the community center was proof that even the deepest wounds could lead to meaningful change, not just for themselves, but for everyone they touched. Lisa and Emily, once on opposite sides, had forged a new path together, a path of forgiveness, resilience, and optimism. Their shared journey not only healed their past, but also laid the foundation for a brighter future for countless others. The story of Emily and Lisa isn't just about conflict. It's about overcoming adversity, correcting mistakes, and finding inner strength. What do you think about Emily's decision to forgive and Lisa's transformation? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to spread the message. See you in the next story. Officer James Miller sat in his patrol car on a quiet Thursday afternoon, sipping his now cold coffee from the local diner. His eyes narrowed as he watched the steady flow of traffic along Oak Street, one of the main roads connecting the suburbs to the city's medical district. After 15 years on the force, he had developed what he called his instincts, what others might recognize as something far more troubling. The digital clock on his dashboard read 2:45 p.m. when a sleek black Mercedes caught his attention. Behind the wheel sat a young black woman, with another who looked identical in the passenger seat. Both were dressed in what appeared to be medical scrubs beneath their coats. Miller's jaw tightened. In his mind, something didn't add up. Too nice a car for this neighborhood, he muttered to himself, conveniently forgetting about the row of million-dollar homes just 2 blocks away. Without hesitation, he pulled out behind the Mercedes, running the plates before flipping on his lights. The Mercedes signaled and pulled over smoothly, stopping in a perfect position well off the main road. Miller noticed how the driver placed both hands on the steering wheel. Clearly, she knew the drill. This made him even more suspicious. As he approached the vehicle, Miller took his time making the occupants wait. He noticed their hospital ID badges hanging from the rearview mirror but chose to ignore them. "License and registration," he barked, not bothering with the usual greeting. "Of course, officer," the driver responded calmly. "I'm Sarah Carter, and this is my sister, Dr. Rachel Carter. We're trauma surgeons at City General, and we're actually on our way to—" Miller cut her off. "Did I ask for your life story? License and registration," he demanded. The twins exchanged a quick glance. Sarah reached slowly for her purse while Rachel kept her hands visible on her lap. Their movements were deliberate and practiced. Clearly, they'd been through this before. As Sarah handed over her documents, Rachel spoke up. Her voice was steady but urgent. "Officer, we really need to explain. We've been called in for an emergency surgery. There's been a major accident, and, ma'am, one more word, and we're going to have a problem," Miller interrupted, his hand resting meaningfully on his belt. "Your sister can explain to the judge why she was doing 58 in a 45 zone." This was a lie. They had been driving exactly at the speed limit, but Miller had long since mastered the art of finding violations where none existed. He returned to his patrol car, taking his time with the paperwork while watching the twins in his rearview mirror. They sat perfectly still, hands visible, faces forward. His radio crackled to life. "All units in the vicinity of City General, be advised, incoming trauma case, multiple vehicles involved. All available medical personnel are being called in." Miller ignored it, continuing to write up the ticket with painstaking slowness. He saw the twins checking their phones, their faces growing increasingly concerned. Still, they remained silent and cooperative. Just as he was about to exit his vehicle, his personal phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him answer it. "Is this Officer James Miller?" a voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "Sir, this is Nurse Martinez from City General Emergency Department. Your daughter Emma was just brought in. She was involved in a multi-car accident on Highway 27. Her condition is critical, and we need your immediate authorization for emergency surgery." The world seemed to freeze. Miller's hand began to tremble. "Emma, but she was just at school." "Sir, you need to get here as soon as possible. The trauma team is being assembled. We need your consent for—" Miller didn't hear the rest. His eyes darted back to the Mercedes in front of him, where the Carter twins were now reading messages on their phones. He watched as they exchanged urgent words, clearly discussing something critical. With shaking fingers, he finally focused on their credentials properly. Dr. Sarah Carter and Dr. Rachel Carter, chief residents in trauma surgery at City General Hospital, the same hospital where his daughter was now fighting for her life. The same doctors being called in for emergency surgery. The same surgery he had been delaying with his unfounded traffic stop. Miller's throat went dry as the full weight of his actions hit him. He had allowed his prejudices to potentially cost valuable minutes. Minutes his daughter might need to survive. He stepped out of his patrol car, his legs barely able to hold him up as he approached the Mercedes once more. The contempt in his voice had been replaced by something else entirely. Fear. Officer Miller approached the Mercedes with trembling hands, his entire demeanor now transformed. The twins looked up at him, their expressions still professional but guarded. Before he could speak, Dr. Sarah Carter was already showing him her phone screen. "Officer, we just received the trauma alert. Multiple casualties from a highway accident, including a teenage girl in critical condition. We're the on-call trauma surgeons, and every minute counts." "That's my daughter," Miller interrupted, his voice cracking. "Emma Miller. She's 16. Please, I just got the call." The twins' expressions shifted instantly from restrained frustration to focus and determination. Dr. Rachel Carter was already on her phone, calling the hospital, while her sister started the car. "This is Dr. Rachel Carter. We're en route, delayed by a traffic stop. Inform our team to begin prep. Tell Dr. Matthews to start the initial assessment," she said, then turned to Miller. "Officer, we need to get there immediately. Will you provide an escort?" Miller nodded numbly, rushing back to his patrol car. His hands shook so badly that he could barely grip the steering wheel as he activated his sirens. The Mercedes pulled out in front of him, and together, they sped towards City General. During the 5-minute drive, Miller's mind raced with bitter realizations. If he hadn't stopped them, they would already be at the hospital. If he hadn't let his prejudices guide his actions, they might have had precious extra minutes to prepare for Emma's arrival. The Mercedes navigated traffic skillfully, with Miller's patrol car clearing the way. Through his windshield, he could see the twins coordinating on speakerphone, already discussing surgical strategies and giving orders to their team. They arrived at the emergency entrance of City General, where hospital staff were waiting. The twins jumped out of their car, not bothering to park properly. Dr. Sarah Carter tossed her keys to a waiting orderly while Dr. Rachel Carter was already donning a surgical cap. "Officer Miller, follow us," Dr. Sarah Carter called over her shoulder as they rushed inside. Miller trailed behind them, feeling out of place in his uniform among the medical personnel rushing back and forth. They reached the trauma bay where Emma, surrounded by medical staff, lay. Miller's heart nearly stopped when he saw his daughter. Her face was badly cut, and her school cheerleading uniform was soaked with blood. Machines beeped urgently around her, her stats dropping. "BP 80/40 and falling," a nurse shouted. "Get her 2 or 3 units now," Dr. Rachel ordered, while Dr. Sarah turned to Miller. Her voice was firm but compassionate. "Officer Miller, we need your consent for emergency surgery. Emma has internal bleeding and possible head trauma. Every second counts. Do we have your permission?" Miller nodded frantically, scribbling his signature on the forms a nurse thrust at him. He watched helplessly as they wheeled his daughter toward the operating room. The twins walked alongside the gurney, already calling out orders. "Type and cross for 6 units. Get CT on standby. Tell anesthesia we're coming up," Dr. Sarah called. At the doors, Dr. Sarah paused briefly. Gone was any trace of the woman Miller had profiled and harassed just minutes earlier. In her place stood a confident surgeon, ready to save his daughter's life. "Officer Miller, we'll do everything we can for Emma. The waiting room is down that hall. Someone will update you regularly." She met his eyes directly. "Officer, despite what happened earlier, know that your daughter will receive our absolute best care. That's who we are." With those words, she disappeared through the doors, leaving Miller standing alone in the hallway. His world completely turned upside down. He stared at the closed doors, remembering how he had treated them during the traffic stop. The suspicion, the condescension, the barely veiled hostility. Now, these same women held his daughter's life in their hands. A kind-faced nurse led him to the waiting room, where he sank into an uncomfortable chair. His uniform, usually a source of pride, now felt heavy and suffocating. He thought about all the traffic stops he had made over the years, all the assumptions he had jumped to, all the lives he might have impacted with his biased actions. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet room, each second reminding him of the time he wasted during the traffic stop. Each minute that passed was another minute his daughter spent fighting for her life under the care of 2 doctors he had wrongly judged. Miller buried his face in his hands, the weight of his actions crashing down on him as he waited for news about Emma's condition. 2 hours crawled by in the waiting room, Officer Miller had abandoned his chair and was now pacing restlessly, his boots squeaking against the polished floor. He had removed his uniform jacket, and his badge now felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds on his chest. Every time the doors opened, his heart leapt. But it was never news about Emma. He watched other families receive updates from different doctors, some crying with relief, others collapsing in grief. Still, he waited. Finally, Dr. Rachel Carter emerged, still wearing her surgical cap, but now dressed in clean scrubs, no longer stained with blood. Miller rushed forward, his face pale with worry. "Emma is stable for now," she said immediately, seeing the fear in his eyes. "Sarah is continuing with the main surgery, but I wanted to update you personally on what we found." She led him to a quieter corner of the waiting room. Her manner was professional yet gentle. "Your daughter suffered significant internal bleeding from the impact. The airbag saved her life, but she has a ruptured spleen that we're removing. There's also some swelling in her brain that we're closely monitoring." Miller slumped against the wall. "Is she going to be okay?" "Her chances are weak, but she'll live," Dr. Rachel replied carefully. "The next few hours are critical. Sarah is one of the best surgeons I know, and not just because she's my twin." A small smile crossed her tired face. "Emma is young and strong. That's in her favor." Miller looked at the floor, shame flooding over him. "Dr. Carter, about earlier, I need to apologize," he said. "The way I treated you and your sister." She raised a hand, stopping him. "Officer Miller, right now, our only concern is your daughter. We can discuss everything else later." As if on cue, her pager beeped urgently. She checked it, her expression turning serious. "I need to get back. Someone will update you again soon." She turned to leave, but Miller called after her. "How long? How long will the surgery take?" "Several more hours at least," she answered. "If you want to understand more about what's happening, you can observe from the gallery. Sometimes it helps families to see their loved ones being cared for, even if it's difficult to watch." Miller nodded gratefully, and a nurse led him to the observation room above or 3. Through the large window, he could see the organized chaos below. Dr. Sarah Carter stood at the operating table, her movements precise and confident as she worked to save Emma's life. Medical instruments gleamed under bright lights. Monitors displayed Emma's vital signs, and nurses moved efficiently around the room, anticipating the surgeon's needs before they were even spoken. Dr. Rachel returned to the OR quickly, scrubbing in to rejoin her sister. Miller watched in awe as the twins worked in perfect sync, barely needing to speak to communicate. Their hands moved with incredible skill, their focus absolute. From his vantage point, Miller could see details he had missed before. The way Dr. Sarah's forehead creased in concentration when Emma's blood pressure dipped. How Rachel's eyes never left her work even when wiping sweat from her brow. The gentle way they handled Emma's unconscious form as if she were their own daughter. These were the same women he had treated with such disrespect just hours ago. The same women he had assumed couldn't afford their car, couldn't possibly be doctors, couldn't be telling the truth about their emergency. A memory flashed in his mind. Sarah's hands placed carefully on the steering wheel during the traffic stop, Rachel keeping her movements slow and deliberate. He realized now that they weren't just following police protocol. They were trying to stay alive. How many times had they been profiled before? How many officers like him had made assumptions about them based solely on their appearance? Yet here they were, fighting to save his daughter's life with everything they had. Below, an alarm began beeping rapidly. Miller pressed closer to the glass as the surgical team's movements became more urgent. Dr. Sarah called out orders in a clear, steady voice while Dr. Rachel worked quickly to address whatever had gone wrong. Miller's heart raced as he watched, feeling completely helpless. All his authority as a police officer meant nothing here. He couldn't protect Emma. He couldn't help her. All he could do was watch and pray that these two remarkable doctors, women he had wrongly judged, would be able to save his little girl's life. In the OR, the twins continued their work, unaware of his tortured thoughts, as they focused on their single mission, keeping Emma alive. The observation room grew darker as evening settled in, but Miller barely noticed. His eyes remained fixed on the operating room below, where the Carter twins continued their intricate work to save Emma's life. The latest crisis had been managed, a dangerous drop in blood pressure that had made his heart stop, but he knew they weren't out of danger yet. A soft knock on the door made him turn. A young nurse entered with a cup of coffee and a sandwich. "Dr. Rachel asked me to bring you something," she said kindly. "She mentioned you haven't eaten since this started." Miller accepted the coffee but couldn't imagine eating. "How long have they been operating?" he asked, realizing he'd lost all track of time. 5 hours now," the nurse replied, checking her watch. "They haven't taken a single break." She paused, then added, "You know, we were all worried when we heard it was your daughter. The Carter sisters, well, they've had some difficult experiences with local police." Miller's grip tightened on the coffee cup. "What do you mean?" The nurse hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. "Last year, Dr. Sarah was pulled over 3 times in 1 week. Once, they made her lie on the ground because they said her medical license looked fake. Dr. Rachel had to come verify her identity while still wearing her surgical scrubs." Miller felt sick. He had done similar things himself, hadn't he? How many times had he assumed someone's credentials were fraudulent, their story a lie, their presence suspicious, all based solely on the color of their skin? Below, he watched as Dr. Sarah adjusted a light over Emma's surgical site, while Dr. Rachel carefully monitored the brain pressure readings. Their movements showed no sign of fatigue, no hint of the prejudice they had endured, no trace of resentment toward the father of their patient. Suddenly, the monitors began beeping rapidly again. Miller pressed against the glass as activity in the operating room intensified. Blood pressure was dropping. A nurse called out, "She's hemorrhaging." Dr. Sarah announced calmly, "Rachel, take over here. I need to check the surgical site." Miller watched in terror as red blood began pooling faster than the suction could remove it. The twins moved with increased urgency but maintained their composed precision. Other staff rushed to bring additional supplies and units of blood. "Come on, Emma," Miller whispered, pressing his palms against the cold glass. "Fight, baby girl, please fight." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the surgical team worked to locate and stop the bleeding. Miller couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but watch as these 2 doctors, these women he had disrespected and delayed, fought to keep his daughter alive. Finally, Dr. Rachel's voice cut through the tension. "Leadings controlled. BP stable rising." Miller's legs gave out, and he sank into a chair. Below, the twins exchanged a brief glance of shared relief before continuing their work with renewed focus. The nurse who had stayed quiet in the room spoke softly. "I've worked with them for 3 years now. They're the best trauma surgeons we have. But you know what makes them truly special? After everything they've been through, all the discrimination they've faced, they never let it affect how they treat their patients or their patients' families." Miller thought about his own behavior, how quick he had been to judge them, to assert his authority, to make them feel less than what they were. Now, he sat watching helplessly as these same women held his daughter's life in their skilled hands. Through the glass, he could see Dr. Sarah's eyes crinkle slightly, the only visible part of her face above her surgical mask, as she said something that made her sister nod in agreement. Despite their exhaustion, despite the high stakes, despite everything that had happened earlier that day, they remained focused and professional. "We're lucky," the nurse continued, heading toward the door. "Most doctors would have transferred a case if they had history with a patient's family. But when they heard it was your daughter, they didn't hesitate. That's who they are." She left, leaving Miller alone with his thoughts and his shame, watching the careful dance of surgery continue below. The monitors showed Emma's heartbeat, steady now, strong like her father's prejudices. The latest crisis had been overcome, but Miller knew that while the twins might save his daughter's life tonight, he had much deeper wounds to address within himself. After 7 grueling hours of surgery, Dr. Sarah Carter finally stepped back from the operating table, while Dr. Rachel began closing Emma's surgical incisions. The primary dangers had been addressed, the ruptured spleen removed, the brain swelling controlled, and all bleeding stopped. In the observation room, Miller had not moved from his seat. His coffee was cold and untouched. The sandwich was still wrapped beside him. He watched as Dr. Sarah removed her surgical gown and mask, rubbing her tired eyes before heading toward the door. A few minutes later, she appeared in the observation room. "Officer Miller," she said softly, her voice hoarse from the long hours of surgery. "Emma's stable. We've done everything we can for now. The next 24 hours will be critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Miller stood on shaky legs. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Thank you for saving her." Dr. Sarah's expression softened slightly. "She'll be in recovery soon. You can see her in about an hour, once we've settled her in the ICU." She picked up Emma's chart, making some final notes. "She's a fighter, your daughter. Her vitals stayed strong even during the most difficult parts of the surgery." Miller nodded, unable to speak. He watched as Dr. Rachel finished the final sutures below, her movements still precise despite the exhaustion she must have been feeling. "Dr. Carter," he started, then corrected himself. "Dr. Sarah, I need to say something." She looked up from the chart, her face neutral but attentive. "What I did today, the way I treated you and your sister, it was wrong, completely wrong." His voice shook with emotion. "I've been a police officer for 15 years, and I told myself that my actions were about instinct, about experience, but today showed me the truth. I judged you based on nothing but prejudice, and I'm deeply ashamed." Sarah listened quietly, her expression unreadable. Below them, Rachel had finished the closing sutures and was directing the team to prepare Emma for transport to recovery. "You know what the hardest part of medical school was?" Sarah finally asked, surprising Miller with the question. "It wasn't the long hours of study, or the difficult exams, or even the grueling residency. It was walking into rooms where patients would immediately ask for a different doctor. It was being mistaken for the cleaning staff while wearing our white coats. It was being pulled over on our way to emergency surgeries, having to prove over and over that we belonged where we were." She paused, watching her sister work below. "But Rachel and I made a promise to each other. We wouldn't let anyone's prejudice stop us from being the best doctors we could be. Every patient, every family, regardless of who they are or how they might have treated us, deserves our absolute best care." Miller felt tears welling in his eyes. "I delayed you because of my prejudice. I delayed you from reaching the hospital. If Emma had..." But she interrupted him firmly. "She's alive. And maybe something good can come from this day." The door opened, and Rachel entered, removing her surgical cap. She looked exhausted but satisfied. "Emma's being moved to recovery now. Her initial post-op readings are good." Miller turned to face both sisters. "I know an apology isn't enough, but I want you both to know that I see you now, really see you. And I'm going to change, not just in words, but with real change." The twins exchanged a look that seemed to carry an entire conversation. Finally, Rachel spoke. "Actions speak louder than words, Officer Miller. Show us that change." "We need to check on Emma in recovery," Sarah added. "The nurses will come get you when you can see her. Try to rest a bit. She'll need you strong when she wakes up." As they turned to leave, Miller called after them. "How do you do it? How do you keep going, keep caring when people like me?" Sarah paused at the door. "Because every life matters, Officer Miller. Even those who might not think ours do." With that, the sisters left, heading to continue their care for Emma. Miller sat back down heavily, watching through the now empty window as the cleaning staff prepared the room for the next surgery. His daughter was alive, saved by two women he had wrongly judged. He pulled out his phone and began composing an email to his police captain. It was time for some real changes in their department's training and policies. The pediatric ICU was quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors when Miller was finally allowed to see Emma. His daughter lay still in the hospital bed, looking small and fragile among the tubes and machines. Her long brown hair, so carefully styled for cheerleading practice that morning, had been partially shaved for the surgery. Dr. Rachel Carter stood beside the bed, checking Emma's vital signs. while Dr. Sarah reviewed the latest test results on a tablet. Both sisters looked exhausted but remained focused on their patient's care. "Her cranial pressure is normal," Sarah reported, showing the readings to her sister. "No signs of increased swelling." Rachel nodded, making a small adjustment to one of the 4 drips. "Blood pressure's been stable for the last hour." "That's a good sign." Miller stood at the foot of the bed, his police uniform wrinkled from the long hours of waiting. He watched as the twins worked in perfect synchronization, their earlier interaction with him seemingly forgotten as they concentrated on Emma's care. A soft moan from the bed made all 3 adults freeze. Emma's fingers twitched slightly, and her eyelids fluttered. "Emma!" Miller moved closer, his heart bracing. "Baby girl, can you hear me?" Dr. Sarah quickly moved to Emma's side, pulling out a small penlight. "Emma, if you can hear me, try to squeeze my hand." She gently took Emma's right hand while shining the light in each of her eyes. To everyone's relief, Emma's fingers gave a weak squeeze. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion evident in her gaze. "What happened?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You were in an accident, sweetheart," Miller explained, tears running down his face. "But you're okay now. These doctors saved your life." Emma's eyes moved slowly between the Carter twins. "2 of you?" she mumbled, still groggy from the anesthesia. "Am I seeing double?" Dr. Rachel smiled warmly. "We're twins. I'm Dr. Rachel and this is my sister, Dr. Sarah. We've been taking care of you. Like the twins on my squad," Emma said softly, her words slightly slurred. "Jasmine and Jessica, they're the only black girls on the cheerleading team. Some people said they only made it because of diversity, but they're the best flyers we have." Miller felt his chest tighten at his daughter's words. How many times had he made similar assumptions about people? How many times had he passed those prejudices on to his daughter, even unintentionally? Dr. Sarah checked Emma's incision sites while Dr. Rachel made notes in the chart. "Getting on any team should be about talent," Sarah said gently. "Just like becoming a doctor should be about skill and dedication, not about what you look like." Emma nodded slightly, then winced. "My head hurts." "That's normal," Rachel assured her. "You had quite a serious injury, but you're doing very well. We'll give you something for the pain in a moment." As Rachel adjusted Emma's medication, Sarah turned to Miller. "She'll probably drift in and out of sleep for the next few hours. That's completely normal. One of us will be checking on her regularly throughout the night." Miller nodded gratefully. "You must be exhausted. Surely other doctors could see her cases through." Sarah interrupted firmly. "Emma is our patient, and we'll make sure she receives continuous care until she's stable enough for transfer to a regular room." Emma's eyes were already closing again as the pain medication took effect. "Dad," she murmured. "I'm here, baby. The doctors. They're like angels. 2 of them watching over me." Miller watched as his daughter drifted back to sleep, her face peaceful despite the tubes and bandages. He looked at the Carter twins, these brilliant, dedicated women whom he had profiled and disrespected just hours ago. They had spent hours saving his daughter's life and were still here, ensuring her recovery, showing nothing but professional care and commitment. "Angels," he repeated softly. "Emma's right. You are angels, and I was too blind to see it." The sisters exchanged a quick glance but remained focused on their work, adjusting monitors and checking readings. Their actions spoke louder than any words could. 2 extraordinary doctors, rising above prejudice to save lives. One patient at a time, Miller sank into the chair beside Emma's bed, preparing for his own long night of watching and waiting, knowing his daughter was in the best possible hands. 3 days after the surgery, Emma's recovery had progressed remarkably well. She had been transferred from the ICU to a regular room, now decorated with cheerleading pom-poms and get-well cards from her squad. The Carter twins continued to monitor her progress, although their visits had become less frequent as the immediate danger had passed. On this particular morning, Officer Miller stood outside the hospital's main conference room, listening to his own voice playing from a video recording inside. He had spent the past 2 days collaborating with the hospital's administration and his police department to organize this special training session. I pulled over 2 doctors because of the color of their skin. His recorded voice echoed through the door. I delayed them from reaching a critical emergency surgery. That patient was my own daughter, and my actions could have cost her her life. Inside the room, dozens of police officers from his precinct sat watching the video testimony he had recorded. The Carter twins sat at the front of the room, having agreed to participate in this first-of-its-kind joint training session between the hospital and police department. Miller took a deep breath and walked in just as the video ended. The room was silent. His fellow officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Many of them had known him for years, had worked alongside him, and had perhaps shared some of the same prejudices. "That's my story," he said, moving to the front of the room. "But it's not just about me. It's about every traffic stop we make based on assumptions. Every time we see suspicion instead of success. Every moment we let our biases override our judgment." Dr. Sarah Carter stood up, her presence commanding respect. "3 months ago, my sister and I were pulled over 4 times in 1 week. Each time we were heading to or from this hospital. Each time we were asked to prove we were really doctors. We keep our hospital IDs visible," Dr. Rachel added, standing beside her sister. "We drive carefully. We keep our hands visible at all times during traffic stops. We've learned these survival tactics because we have to, but we shouldn't have to." A young officer in the back raised his hand. "What about crime statistics? What about maintaining vigilance in high-risk areas?" "Let me ask you something," Miller responded. "When was the last time you pulled over a white doctor in a nice car? When was the last time you assumed their medical license was fake? We call it vigilance. Let's be honest about what it really is." The room grew quiet again as his words sank in. The Carter twins shared a brief look. They had heard these justifications before. "Yesterday," Dr. Sarah continued, "I performed emergency surgery on a gunshot victim. He was a young black man brought in by 2 officers sitting in this room. One of them asked if I was really qualified to do the surgery." She paused, letting the implications of that question hang in the air. "That young man is alive today because we don't let prejudice stop us from saving lives." Dr. Rachel stepped forward. "We're not here to shame anyone. We're here because change is possible. Officer Miller showed us that." He turned his moment of realization into action. Miller nodded, pulling out a folder. "Starting today, our department is implementing new training protocols. Dr. Carter, both Dr. Carters have agreed to help establish a regular dialogue between medical staff and law enforcement. We'll be doing ride-alongs, hospital rotations, and monthly joint sessions. Because the next time you pull over a black doctor," Sarah added, "or lawyer, or business owner, or student, remember this: your assumptions could cost someone their life just like they almost cost Officer Miller his daughter." The session continued for another hour, with officers asking questions and the Carter twins sharing their experiences. Some officers seemed defensive, others thoughtful, but all were engaged. As the room cleared out afterward, Emma appeared at the door in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse. She was still weak but improving daily. The sight of her made everyone pause. "I wanted to thank my angels again," she said, smiling at the Carter twins, "and see what my dad was up to." Miller walked over and kissed his daughter's forehead, then turned to face his colleagues. "This is what it's about," he said quietly. "Not statistics, not assumptions, not prejudices. It's about seeing people, really seeing them for who they are." The Carter twins moved to Emma's wheelchair, checking her surgical sites with professional care. Their presence in the room, their skill, their dignity in the face of prejudice, spoke volumes, more than any training session could. 6 months after Emma's accident, Officer Miller stood at a podium in the City General Hospital's main auditorium. The room was packed with police officers, medical staff, local media, and community members. Behind him sat the Carter twins, along with Emma, now fully recovered and back on her cheerleading squad. "Today we're celebrating more than just the success of our joint training program," Miller began, his voice strong and clear. "We're celebrating a change in culture. In the past 6 months, Complaints about racial profiling and traffic stops have dropped by 70% in our district. Emergency medical personnel reports 0 delays due to police interference. But numbers don't capture the full picture. He gestured toward Emma, who sat with her cheerleading uniform bright against the formal attire of those around her. My daughter is alive because 2 brilliant surgeons saved her life. 2 surgeons whom I profiled, disrespected, and delayed just minutes before learning she needed their help. That day changed me forever, but more importantly, it ignited a change in our entire department. Dr. Sarah Carter stepped up to the podium next, her white coat crisp and professional. When Officer Miller first proposed this training program, my sister and I were skeptical. We'd heard promises of change before, but this was different. This was action, not just words. Dr. Rachel joined her sister. In the past 6 months, we've had police officers shadow us in the ER. They've seen firsthand what delays can mean in emergency medicine, and we've ridden along with officers, helping them understand our perspective as both medical professionals and Black women. From her seat, Emma watched proudly as her father and the doctors who saved her life continued to change their community. She thought about Jasmine and Jessica, her twin teammates, who no longer got pulled over on their way to cheerleading practice. She thought about her own prejudices, the ones she hadn't even recognized before the accident. The ceremony continued with awards and recognitions. Other hospitals had started adopting their training program. Police departments from nearby cities were sending representatives to learn from their experience. Real change was taking place, rippling outward from one terrible yet transformative day. After the ceremony, Miller found the Carter twins in the hospital corridor, preparing for their next surgery. "You've done more than save my daughter," he said quietly. "You've helped save the soul of our department." Dr. Sarah adjusted her surgical cap. "Change happens one person at a time, Officer Miller. You are ready to change. Not everyone is, but those who are ready need to see that it's possible." Dr. Rachel added, "That's what this program shows them." Emma appeared beside her father, walking with the confident stride of someone who had faced death and emerged stronger. "Dad, can we still stop for ice cream after my checkup next week?" "Of course, sweetheart," he said, then turned back to the twins. "We have something for you." Emma pulled out 2 small boxes from her cheerleading jacket. Inside each was a silver angel wing pendant. "You called them angels that night," Miller reminded his daughter. "And they are," Emma said, holding out the boxes to the Carter twins. "Angels in surgical caps." The sisters accepted the gifts with touched smiles, but a beeping from their pagers interrupted the moment. "Speaking of surgical caps," Sarah said, checking the page. "Duty calls. Multi-car accident coming in. No police escort needed this time. Clear roads for emergency vehicles now," Rachel added with a small smile. As they hurried toward the ER, Miller watched them go. 2 brilliant doctors, 2 dedicated surgeons, 2 angels in disguise. He thought about how close his prejudice had come to costing him everything and how these women had turned that moment into a movement for change. Emma slipped her hand into his. "They're amazing, aren't they, Dad?" "They are, baby girl. They truly are." He squeezed her hand. "Ready for your follow-up appointment?" As they walked toward the clinic, they passed the hospital's newly installed plaque. "Prejudice delays. Understanding saves lives." Below it were 2 sets of footprints. A police boot print and a medical shoe print walking forward together. The story of a racist cop and 2 Black doctors had become something more, a testament to the possibility of change, the power of forgiveness, and the triumph of human dignity over prejudice. In the end, it wasn't just Emma's life that was saved that day. It was the beginning of saving many more lives, one changed mind at a time.